I could put my hat. Okay, everyone, we will head back. Thank you for supplying gluten-free mince pies. I saw that. I thought, oh, awesome. Somebody's been very thoughtful to give me. Yeah. All right, everyone, we're back. All right, we're now on to item 12, which is the submission to the natural and built environment. Oh, thanks. I wonder where I left that. I made another one. So, sorry, Blair did say, who was presenting to this, now totally forgotten. Hannah, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Apologies, that looks really glary. It doesn't at my end. So, good morning. The purpose of this report today is to seek approval from Council on the development of the process for us developing our submissions on the recently introduced Natural and Built Environment Bill and the Spatial Planning Bill. So also today, Mark Davies in the chamber, just to answer some questions and provide further commentary. Hopefully he's visible around there somewhere. I'll take the report as read, but I'll also provide just a quick recap. The government's undertaking a review of the resource management system. We went through this quite comprehensively as part of the induction process. So the Resource Management Act is being replaced by 3 pieces of legislation. The topic of the report today is about providing a submission on the first 2 of those pieces, which are the substantive pieces. We've provided comment throughout the process to date over the last few years. This report also provides a high-level summary of the key themes we've pointed out across that process. The timeframe for submissions was originally through to the 30th of January, which is quite tight, and over our Christmas New Year period. It has subsequently been extended to the 5th of February. That was based on a number of letters, one of which was from our Mayor seeking an extension, pointing out the difficulty in meeting this timeframe and providing quality and robust feedback. What we've also found out as of this morning is there's the potential to request an additional extension through the Select Committee to the 19th of February, and that's being considered on a case-by-case basis. So we'll be seeking to do that to ensure that both our staff and elected members have a really quality amount of time to put into that submission to make sure that it's articulating everything that we have discussed to date. So in terms of the process going forward, we've commenced drafting our submissions with some key theme work already being undertaken with the elected members that are outlined in the recommendation of today's report. You'll also note that the draft submission, once it is in a more substantive form, will be circulated back to all elected members for feedback. It's likely that this will be in later January now if we're successful in getting that additional extension. And lastly, the report seeks confirmation of Council's representatives at the hearings in front of the Select Committee. So that's a really high-level overview, but more than happy to take any questions. We will be bringing back to the 2nd of February the draft submission in its entirety likely, so that we can discuss the actual content a lot more than today. Today's more about process. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions on that before I make a comment? No? So you can see what the recommendation was. We are putting together a slightly different combination of people for looking at the reforms in the whole, a little strategic advice group. But this was constituted the way it was just because of the condensed time frame, which now Hannah has said there's a tiny bit of leeway in that now. So it was basically on the basis of a small, tight group. You will see it before the submission goes, but I can gives me approval to sign off just in terms of the date-wise with the February meeting. So it's coming to the February meeting now, isn't it? So that's a change to that, cool. So that, the need for me to sign off may not actually exist, but of course you've got to be a bit agile and flexible, right?
I think, Mayor Paula, just with the further information that Hannah raised with the potential extension to the 18th of February, there will be a draft coming to the 2nd of February, but it may well be that there'll be further changes required. So the delegation to the group and ultimately yourself allows us to make that submission document as good as possible right up until the 18th of February or close to it. So, so that delegation is important. So
Cool.
I would see that 2nd of February will be an update, and then there'll be a final version after that.
So, Councillor Thompson, this is the one that you wanted to have some input to. So, so I was confused because you are in part of a strategic group at the broad scope of reforms, but this one was, and I was trying to remember how we put it together. This one was because of the time pressure, and of course it's getting very close to.
In a calendar invite to, if I'm available to be able to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't have a strong view. You can be part of it. I know it's going to be a fairly busy time for you as well. So, so we'll certainly want to reach out and get as much feedback as possible. If you want to be on it, you're welcome. If not, we'll include you in the council part of the thing.
If I can be on it, that would be great. Just, I mean, as long as there's
Anybody
not an
have
issue
any
with
objections
quorum
to
if
that?
the timing, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
is-
yeah. I'm happy to include you in that respect. You know, putting brains together is a good thing. All right, so if we can just add Sarah into there, that would be really. Pardon?
Change that just to say February. Or
Have
we
you-
have to change H to February rather than 30th of January in
Yeah.
the recommendation.
Yeah, so we'll make those, yeah, I was just getting to the
Yeah.
first bit first, but yeah, so we'll change B and we'll change the dates. So we're just going to put it up, okay?
I think we need to make another change in there.
What's
on
that?
Item E in the recommendation.
Yeah, it's coming, I think, isn't it? Yeah. I have removed that already. So that is now correct? Yes? I'm happy to so move, if I have a seconder. Deputy Mayor Angela, any questions, comments, concerns? Thank you. We'll go to the vote in just a second. Just to say, of course, with all of these processes, we do welcome your thoughts via email or, you know, if you have a random moment, a brainwave or some thoughts, you know, please do always share through my office and through Blair's office. That will be fine. We can incorporate it in our discussions. And we'll go to the vote. Yeah, we'll go to the vote on the board. Yes, we have success. And don't worry, both light up even though you only press one. Not quite sure why that is, but it's a bit weird. Who has not voted? Oh, Louise is, can't vote on the board. Are you in favour, Louise? Just stick your hand up for me. Thank you. Okay, and include Louise, please.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Right, that takes us to item 13, the consideration of a targeted rate for the Climate Action Programme. I'm not sure who's reporting to this one. Ah, hi, Julie. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor Southgate and councillors. This is an information report back to council. Out of the last triennium, there was a request that staff provide some information to elected members about options for funding the climate strategy. It's our climate future, which was adopted in the last triennium. And one of the particular things we were asked to report back was the consideration of a targeted rate in the 23-24 annual plan cycle. We had a briefing session last week with elected members, and there were three options that staff put forward. One was to include a targeted rate as part of the 23-24 annual plan cycle. The second option was to consider a targeted rate as part of our long-term plan cycle, which we are commencing the work on now, and the long-term plan commences in 2024. And then the third option, in consideration of the discussion around the opportunity to use Better Off funding, was to add the opportunity for some targeted climate change resourcing and projects to be considered to that project list that will be coming back to council in 2nd of February, I think it is.
So I do have a question about it because, sorry, just in respect to the recommendation that's on page 114, I'm favourable to the idea of discussing options for the Better Off funding, obviously, but it includes the consideration of a targeted rate in the annual plan. I'm not favourable to that.
So
Is that what this is saying?
No, so the recommendation is just noting that we have brought that information back to council. If you would like to give us more direction, so the recommendation is responding to the request of council, which is to provide the information, so we're noting that we've done that. If you would like us to give us more direction and direct us to consider the consideration of climate change funding through the Better Off
So that was
project, we'd
guidance
need a
that came through the annual plan workshop thing, right?
Yes.
So some of us were there, some weren't. Okay. I think all right, I'll take questions, I'll come back to what I think might be good way forward, Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor Paula, and I'm keen to see the motion,
Could we maybe
I
pop
think,
the
as
motion
well.
up?
So, yeah, the Mayor's just confirmed the question that I had, or a rate, any rate, just can't be considered in an annual plan, unless we went out and did a special consultative process, because it's significant, right, under our policy?
Yes, it's a bit more extensive than that. So
Yeah.
to consider the introduction of a targeted rate, so any sort of new rate during an annual plan cycle, requires you to actually do an LTP amendment.
Yeah,
Because
okay,
you're
that's right.
changing the way you've talked to the community about the way you're going to fund things, and it triggers significance and engagement. We have to do that more formal process. That does require a special consultative process, but more importantly, it requires that we have audit come and audit our consultation document before we can have the conversation with the community. It also requires us to basically restate our existing LTP document to include the option of the targeted rate, alongside doing a normal annual plan document as well.
So in terms of the motion from the committee then, were they given the advice that all those difficulties and that it really needs to be an LTP decision, or not? I mean, it doesn't really need to be an LTP position, it's just timing wise, and it says in here somewhere, doesn't it, that you're saying that almost that it can't be done timing-wise for this annual plan round.
So maybe if I answer, I think there's a couple of questions
Yeah,
there, so if I
sorry.
don't answer all of them, please
Yeah.
remind me what you were asking.
Yeah.
So the first question is from the committee. The committee were wanting to give staff, committee were recognising the importance of this matter to the community, and now that we have an adopted climate change strategy, they were wanting to make sure that staff started taking action as soon as possible. And so their request to staff was to go and look at options. They didn't specifically talk in detail about what those options were, but they did ask us to consider a targeted rate, because that's something that other councils have across the country for climate change.
Okay.
So we didn't get into the discussion about whether you could do it or not in
Yeah.
an annual plan cycle.
Yeah.
Yes, and in terms of the issue with doing it in an annual plan cycle, of course we can do it. However, we've this morning heard the impact that of audit having very limited resources and the impact that's had on council. So that's one of the things we'd need to consider. Audit would have to audit our consultation document. They cannot not do it.
Yeah.
But that will maybe
Yeah.
a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. And just one last thing, and maybe this is to David Bryant, maybe? I'm kind of concerned, because we've got so much money from the government we've got the 43 million from the SURF fund, and a lot of the projects that were on that list, Evelise is here somewhere, a lot will deliver on the climate change, will deliver on everything, in my committee as well. Plus we seem to, some of the motions have lagged behind the success of some of the grants. So how will we be, or the intent of some of the motions, how will we lasso all of those funds, because we still don't know I don't think from Waka Kotahi what's actually in that 43 million, what they're actually going. We have a rough idea from the 80 projects that we put up. So how are we going to get in front of that to deal with some of the motions that are lying on the table?
So maybe if I answer first.
Maybe that is yours, Julie, yeah. Aware that we'll start work also, 18 months worth of work for the LTP.
So what we want to do is make sure that when we bring back the initial budget discussions to council on the annual plan for next year, so the 23-24 annual plan, that we can hopefully get as much information as we can to understand this, particularly the SURF funding. And so we can indicate where that is going to deliver, particularly to some climate change initiatives, particularly the moving to alternative modes of transport opportunities. But again, we're dependent on getting that information out, but we will bring as much as we can to that February meeting where we start talking
So
about
we
that.
will hopefully be fully informed of, yeah, okay.
Yes.
All right, cool, thank you.
In addition to that, I suppose, as part of that meeting as well, we'll be talking about the projects that are being put up for the Better Off funding as well.
Yeah, yeah, great, thank you.
Evelyn, do you?
Okay, any further discussion? I would just like to, pardon, question? Oh, thanks, sorry, Maxine.
Thank you. So I think in terms of the discussion that you've just created around the annual plan and the ability to bring back information through that process, I wonder if we're adding additional projects or through C, whether there are new things coming, what impact that will have on our balancing the books and the already challenging position that we're in trying to do that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. What we want to do is put the information in front of elected members in February so you can understand the impact of putting forward projects. Anything additional that's not already scheduled, and we have included in the appendix the list of work that we already have planned for 2023-24 for climate-related initiatives in the annual plan, but anything in addition to that, of course, it will impact balancing the books, unless we have the opportunity to use another funding stream from someone else for that, potentially something like the Better Off funding.
And I think in C, I'm not going to talk to Sarah's intent, she can probably talk to that herself, but that doesn't preclude the discussion about tranche 2 as well, does it?
I have no faith in tranche 2 at the moment, so we no, but no.
Oh, no, yes, sorry, Deputy Mayor, you're up again.
Yeah, sorry, just one last question. I'm just looking at the motion, and I'm only concerned with C because that Q jumps ahead of any work that, or any projects that, well, actually, it Q jumps the previous motion, right? Because it's saying that staff will work only with the climate change working group. So what about for Better Off funding proposals? What about community and infrastructure?
Can I clarify the intent?
On the edges
Yeah.
as well.
So the intent, essentially, within the report that we've received today, it talks about how we can resource moving ahead with the climate strategy. It gives two options, targeted rate or using some of the Better Off funding. And this is simply, so this isn't saying we're going to use any of the Better Off funding for climate change initiatives, but it's saying in terms of having those on the table for elected members to consider, could we please first take them to the climate change working group to work through any details of what any initiative should actually look like, so that there's been a little bit of oversight or discussion before they're put forward to elected members to consider as part of the wider discussion of how we apply that funding, if that makes sense. So it's essentially just looking at what's been proposed already in that report as an option, but working it through a little bit more.
So,
that makes sense.
so clarity again, though, are you saying that then that the climate change working group will be able to come up with all sorts of new ideas to put on a list? Because I think that feels to me like that's not aligned with previous intent of the motion, which is that staff look at what we've already got planned and come back with a list.
So I see where you're going with the question, because my question was going to be similar, if I can just jump in,
Yeah,
hopefully to
no,
be
go.
helpful, not to be difficult here. The climate action plan and strategy exist, so you'll be looking at what within that strategy could be delivered. Is that right?
Well,
As opposed to-
anything that's looked at would align with the strategy, but there's no implementation plan currently, so there aren't.
Right,
So,
but it's
but staff have worked up some options in terms of, it was 750,000 a year for 3 years for some initiatives. But that hasn't been socialised at all in terms of elected members, what those initiatives,
Cool.
I guess, should look
Cool.
like.
So-
So, I mean, it's essentially, we could put in there that we limit it to some point, limit their scope of what they consider, but then it starts to get a bit wordy.
Yeah, no, look, I
And
have
there's a
confidence
mix
in
of
the group
councillors
working
on that
through.
working group who, I assume would come to some balanced.
But you're in that group
I guess-
anyway,
no,
aren't
I'm
you?
not on the climate change working group. I guess my only concern, and 100% support where you're going, but I guess my only concern is if you queue jump, see my words, if you queue jump, what weight will that give staff when they come back with a list? Will community or infrastructure, and a lot of infrastructure stuff I know you'll put in there, but will that then be down the bottom of the list because Emotion has directed staff to work with the climate change working group, and so you'll give them weight for council to consider, which of course is the final decision maker.
I think the intention of strategic thinking groups, of which the climate action is one, is that they do a little bit of the workhorse around with staff, directed with staff within the scope of the plans and strategies that exist, but that pops out for discussion with the wider council. That is the full expectation of those groups, is that they come out and say to council, we recommend this and why we recommend this, and that's supported by staff, of course.
I understand Deputy Mayor O'Leary's concerns. So maybe if we're able to just get some reassurance that essentially would be able to have, when options for the Better Off funding plan come to us, that it's easy to put things in and out so that elected members can prioritise, I guess, easily, if
You're
that
talking
makes
about the
sense.
annual
So
plan
that,
though, yeah?
because I guess there might be an initial, a question is, does this mean it's more likely that some climate change initiatives would be included as the initial recommendation for that Better Off plan, right? Right.
If Julie can add some clarity to this.
Our intention when we come back with the list of projects is first to, on that list of projects, indicate what are the projects, as Andrew mentioned earlier today, would be the ones that we would be ceasing because we can't afford to do them. So that's the first list. The second list would be, what other projects have we identified across the organisation where that would fit the criteria for the Better Off funding? Were there things that we were already partially doing, or were there things where we'll be bringing work forward? The criteria for the Better Off funding is very specific, and so we need to make sure things fit that. And then, of course, the third part of that list would be the list of new requirements where there is no existing work program, and so that would definitely, if you wanted to fund them and not use the Better Off funding, you can still do that, but it's going to impact your balancing the books position. And then definitely it's, for elected members to make that decision, we'd want to bring that to a workshop first.
Mover and seconder would exercise a small change. The bit I have difficulty with is B, including the consideration of a targeted rate in that sentence as opposed to in the sentence D, which refers to the long-term plan itself.
That was just, that's just noting that staff gave us a briefing on that. if that
Okay.
makes sense. So they presented information including that, about-
Oh, it's the resolution we passed. Okay.
simply noting the
Okay,
briefing
cool.
we had.
Cool. All right, well, that's fine then. I'll live with it.
Yeah.
As long as the expectations are clear that the targeted rate is an LTP discussion and the.
Yes, yeah, but D clarifies, I think D
Yeah, it
makes
does. I
clear.
just thought it was better.
Yeah.
Better positioning, but I'm okay. I'm fine with that. Let's move on to debate and voting.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Firstly, I just want to thank staff for coming back to us with funding options because the Environment Committee last term did feel that it was important that there were some more immediate and urgent steps taken following the adoption of the strategy, so it didn't just gather dust until the long-term plan. However, Auckland did have good success in terms of putting a climate change targeted rate in their annual plan recently, and it received good support from the wider community. However, in this case, the timing really just doesn't work. Unfortunately, we've had elections in the midst of everything, and that's meant that we haven't really been able to form up any concrete proposal or spend time having quality engagement with the community. So I think it's important that we look at this for the long-term plan rather than right now, particularly so we can allow that really good conversation with our community. In terms of the Better Off funding, this is simply, I guess, preparing initiatives for then us to consider in February. It's not locking us in at all in terms of how we apply that funding. But I would like to see, I guess the point of the working group really is to work through at an elected member level to ensure that initiatives that come to the table are ones that we feel are really going to be the best value for the community and deliver the results we're looking for. So I think, just having worked through initiatives ready for that conversation in February is important, which is why that I've included that there too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Paula. Look, I'm very supportive of targeted rates. I think it's the most transparent way to show a council's vision and our goals, not only to ratepayers, it's easy for them to understand, but actually to our stakeholders and to government as well. So I support that being considered in the LTP. I support the work of the working group. I just have this slight unease or not so comfortable about compiling a list that targets one particular fund, like the Better Off, before we've seen a full list of projects and before we actually know about this projects under the SURF fund, because many of those projects that we put up will reduce transport emissions. So it's a little bit cart before the horse, and I just don't want us to be putting and taking from funds when we're covered through something else. So I have utmost confidence in the working group. I guess at the end of the day, council decides as well. So it's just aligning all of that stuff that is a bit frustrating. Not that that's our fault, that's just the way it's all rolling for us at the moment. I also know how determined Sarah is, so, you got to watch her. You got to watch her.
Yes.
I'll just very quickly respond.
Oh, after me though. Thank you. Look, I share the Deputy's support for funding climate initiatives, and we know that it's on the lean side as it presently sits, so we know that it's something we've got to consider. And we heard from the representatives of our community today around seeing some visibility about what we will fund for climate action. And I think that's actually expected of us in the local government arena that we're presently in. It's one of the big issues that the National Council is discussing from an LGNZ Inc. Consideration too. So we know we can't sweep this under the carpet. We've got to do something about climate. And I think the Working Party will do a good group. Share some of the concerns about we've just got to have everything transparently weighed against each other when it comes to spending money for best bang for the buck, of course, for everything that we do. In terms of my only discomfort, I guess, was but it's been kind of solved that the targeted rate would be given too much consideration in the short term as opposed to the long term. I quite like targeted rates in some instances, but we went away from that. We went away from it from the gardens into a general rate again. Has some benefits. It does shine the sun on highlight which areas of spend, which is a really good part of it. It can also be regressive because it means it's often uniform against well, we haven't discussed this. Will it be a uniform rate, and therefore those with lower income will pay exactly the same as those with higher income? So those are the matters we've got to consider when we set our rates, but also there will be some other things that may sit neatly as a targeted rate or not as a targeted rate. And we've talked about that in previous iterations of the long-term plan. What rating mechanisms do we have and how do we apply them? So long as this comes in the context of that, I'm really happy to have the conversation. But don't mistake that for me not wanting to fund climate initiatives. Not at all. Agree with you wholeheartedly. It's lean, needs to have more support. How we provide that support, I'm keen to hear. Very keen to hear what the Climate Action Group comes up with in terms of priorities from the strategy for implementation. So it would be good work. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thought we wanted to be pointing at Louise.
Hello. I just wanted to offer some assurance to Deputy Mayor O'Leary that I definitely hear your comments around the other funding that we've received and the opportunity for infrastructure to do so much climate action. So I just want to provide some reassurance that as the lead of the climate working group that I've heard those comments definitely. I think there's certainly some importance on making sure what we do here is strategic, and it does involve looking at how all of those things line up. And also agree with Mayor Paula's comments around how lean some of the climate funding is at the moment. So just wanted to say my 2 cents of I hear all these comments and definitely will take them on board with what the climate working group will consider and work with.
Brilliant. Thank you. Let's go to the... Oh, did you want to write a reply? Yep. Are you sure? Sure? All right, we'll go to... Go to the vote. Are we getting the... Going to the vote? Is it coming? Yes. One day we'll have such slick IT in here, you won't know yourself. Hey, Amy.
Absolutely agree.
I've voted. Who hasn't voted? Oh, Louise has got a hand up, but we can see.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Did you hear that, Louise? We put you as an opposed. Hope you're okay with that. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Now that brings us on to item 14, which is the Trade, Waste and Wastewater Bylaw Review. And because this is such an exciting topic, I know there will be tons of questions. Happy to. Councillor Hamilton moves. Is there a seconder? Just get it on the table. Huh? Did you want to move it? Deputy Mayor moves. Councillor Hamilton, would you like to second in the spirit of Christmas? Thank you. All right, staff, is there anything to highlight here? Seriously, this is actually a reasonably important piece of work, but, you know, not everyone's cup of tea. Off you go.
So I'm just conscious of that. I might just give a little bit of a background to trade, waste and wastewater, especially in the context of bylaw in Hamilton. Firstly, I'll quickly introduce myself. So my name is Kyle Foley, Environmental Policy Analyst, and to my left we have Mari Porter, Unit Director for the Three Waters Unit. In terms of the decision, staff is seeking a decision to consult to the public on a revised version of the trade, waste and wastewater bylaw. This is following a determination made by the previous council in June 2021 that a bylaw remained the best way to manage trade, waste and wastewater in Hamilton. This bylaw is a local law for Hamilton, which regulates the wastewater network. It relates to not only domestic waste, but also trade waste, being the wastewater from commercial and industrial premises, generally higher in strength, volume and potency than conventional domestic waste. The bylaw administers the 55,000 service connections from homes and businesses around Hamilton, and the network conveys the wastewater consisting of 900 kilometres of pipe, 15,000 manholes and 136 public pump stations. This is to ensure that the Puketi Wastewater Treatment Plant is able to provide high levels of treatment prior to any discharge into the Waikato Awa. Without regulation, both domestic wastewater and trade waste could be discharged into the network without appropriate management. This could result in poor environmental outcomes, reduce asset life and operational performance, and by consequence, could risk our compliance and reputation as an organisation. Council will be very aware of the changes that are occurring in the space of Three Waters. Staff have been required to respond to numerous pieces of legislation from central government as part of this bylaw review. Notwithstanding this, staff consider that the bylaw is fit for purpose during this period of significant legislative change, aside from the few refinements as proposed. These include changes which ensure legal alignment with the bylaw with existing legislation. For example, the addition of matariki as a non-working day, and strengthening the link of the bylaw between the Waikato River Settlement Act and Tūteri Whaimana. With that all said, I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. I'm just on page 132 and happy with the statement of proposal. But in terms of the preferred options, I'm talking about the conversations with mana whenua and iwi around mortuary waste. So is the preferred option there that's going to be in it's not identified specifically in the motion, but because this is about the statement of proposal, so can we have confidence that those discussions will keep occurring and that if a process or an outcome is sought that we need to change the bylaw, you will bring that back to council?
Simple answer, yes.
Yeah, and if that requires a change in the bylaw, we'll have to go through the full consultation process again, or because it's being raised, it would just be an amendment that doesn't need full consultation?
It would be a full consultation procedure.
Okay.
So it would be essentially a review of the bylaw. What I would say is that the topic of mortuary waste needs further discussion with mana whenua, and we've had conversations over the last year and a half with mana whenua on mortuary waste, just almost setting the scene. Right now, we need to understand the issue more, and we're willing to work with mana whenua to understand that issue.
And also, I'm assuming that work will include finding out what other TLAs, if they do this better than we do, what that processes might look like. And,
correct.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm quite interested in that, so thank you.
Thanks for raising that, Councillor O'Leary, because I can quite honestly say hand in heart, I've never given it any consideration at all until you said that. So currently that waste containing water, right, goes into the wastewater, the trade waste, and then goes to the wastewater plant for treatment.
Correct.
So it includes, this is gory, so it includes, chemicals plus human waste, but the human waste being the issue, right?
What is bodily fluids?
Yeah, I wasn't going that far, thanks. But yeah, no, I think just the question I have then is because I do think that's probably a significant issue to resolve, and I think we do have to have a conversation about it. When would that be occurring? Anybody can give Angela, when would we discuss this matter, do you think?
I don't know.
I mean, are we looking,
investigate
another
first,
year
right?
before we tackle it, or are we going to get into the new year and have a conversation about that?
So we've had we met with mana whenua last month to set up a working group for next year. So just would be in the new year sometime.
Okay, so we might get some kind of briefing offline within the first 6 months of next year to understand the issue more. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was good for me to know. I would like to just keep a track on that. Otherwise, these things disappear. Thanks. There's a question from Councillor Bitter.
On the same issue with the mortuary waste, you're consulting with mana whenua. are you proactively consulting with mortuary operators?
Not yet. So at the moment it's discussing almost just, we're in a situation right now where we want to just begin that conversation. So we'll be looking to engage with mortuary waste operators in the new year as well.
So there's the public consultation from 17th January. A lot of the public don't know what goes on and don't get involved in consultation. So again, I just sort of want to confirm what actions you'll take to proactively engage the mortuary operators at that time. Is there anything specific you'll contact them?
Yeah, so
I really do think that this is the first time it's come across our radar. So let's early next year have a briefing on how this review is going to work, how we're going to review that, and how we're going to involve. Because you know, this is an open meeting, so any of those businesses right now just now know that we're going to consider it. So we should work off the back of that. Are you happy if we leave that till
Yes,
then?
perfect.
But we noted in the
Andrew will
minutes.
do that, so,
Thank you.
yeah.
I do just have one little other question. So I think it's the first time that a water type bylaws come up since the Three Waters thing. So would the management of wastewater would go to the new entity, would be part of the transitional thing, right?
So yes, we don't know what the future of bylaws are going to be at this current point, but ultimately we do have, 18 months of where water services sitting with council at this point. So we need a bylaw in the meantime.
Yeah, cool, excellent. Thank you, that answers my question. You got another question, Andrew? No? Okay. Okay, we'll go to the vote. Well, is there any discussion? I think this kind of been raised in the questions. So go to the vote, and I guess you're moving, Deputy Mayor? Seconder, please. Councillor Hamilton has. Oh, thank you, sorry. Thank you. Of course you have. Excellent. We'll go to the vote on the board. And Louise is still there?
Louise has left.
Louise has left the building. All right, how are we going?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Brilliant. Thank you. Next item is item 15, which is the proposed 2023 schedule of meetings. Who's talking to this? Is it just...
So the schedule that you can find attached on page 179 is the schedule we put together based on the previously approved governance structure in terms of reference. We have tried to circulate this to all members to provide feedback and adjust to accommodate any events such as the LGNZ conference that is happening at the end of July. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I'll just make a comment on this. This is an incredibly, it looks like a nice coloured little chart now, and it looks fairly straightforward. I want to hats off to staff because I know this is the most incredibly complex exercise each time. So it is what it is. It sets it out. It's not cast in concrete, of course. Things change, but it gives us a pretty clear steer across the year. I would like to move it and suggest that if the chairs of any of the committees have an issue that they discuss, that's subject to them discussing with Amy, this is approved. I think the more fingers you get in the pie, the worse it is actually, because you start to move things, it's like dominoes toppling. So it is a starting point, and on that basis I'll so move and leave it for staff to manage through the chairs if necessary. Anybody going to second this with me, please? Thank you. Councillor Van Oosten, a question?
Very light question with regard to the frequency of meetings, and I know we've talked about this in the past, but with bi-monthly meetings, how might the agendas of those each of those committees be managed to ensure that they're not overly lengthy and are very much decision-making opportunities rather than information receiving potentially.
That's work in progress. We want to comment on that.
Yeah, so I think we had some of that discussion through the briefing, through the induction. So the idea around standing orders is to actually make sure they are exactly what you said, that they are more decision type items, and more information type items will be circulated under separate cover. Executive update might get a little bit longer, and you probably notice we have sort of a synopsis, and sometimes we have a link in there and that sort of thing. Obviously, we don't want to bog down briefings either. There's a little bit more work that Mish's team are doing on that. And sorry, what was the second part? I've forgotten the second part.
Oh, that was it.
Okay,
Decision-making rather than information
yeah.
sessions, but still giving opportunity for members to be involved in discussion and decision-making.
Yeah, correct.
Early. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thanks. Just a quick question to governance. So when, because down the bottom it's got regional, joint, blah, 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 dates to be confirmed. So when those are confirmed, Waikato Plan regional meetings, they'll all be populated in, and then we'll get a...
Absolutely. They'll
Yeah.
also be populated into your calendars, so
Yeah.
I'm highly suggesting everybody turns off notifications following this meeting.
Ting, 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 ting. Amy, I know that on the website you can see what meetings are coming up now, but do we actually put this on the website as well, sort of in that kind of a form? Or
We haven't in the past, but that doesn't stop us
And could
changing to
we?
doing something else.
yeah, okay, yeah. I think that would just be helpful for general public as well, particularly those members that sit on the regional and joint committees, and you know that's a hell of a lot more work than what you see there now. So I just lived at the regional council last term, so they did have better food, but not anymore.
Oh, shame. Okay, excellent. Okay, let's move to the vote on that one then, please. Does anybody want to debate it? No, thank you. Let's go to the vote.
Today.
Oh, no, it's a bit of a thing, isn't it? Be prepared, councillors, it just comes right in. You we're waiting for the vote, aren't we? Did I vote? Oh, okay, excellent.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Resolution to exclude the public, please. I move that the public be excluded, all hundreds of them. Seconded. All in favour? Good. Let's shut the doors, batten the hatches. Thank you. We have to just wait for the camera to go off.